It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza.
Hello, Irwin.
Greetings. And
Greetings to you.
and it's funny, Esperanza and I were just talking about this briefly before we pressed record, how we've been like sort of on an interview kick here in season 5, and which has been fun and we've really loved it, but it's nice to go back to the roots too.
Yeah, mixing things up a bit, but going back to our habitual banter.
Exactly. We could use some profanities here of what we really do here. But we keep it clean on our Hamptons. But Esperanza, I have to acknowledge and thank one of our listeners. I won't give his last name just in case, but his name is Stephen V. And Stephen wrote a very nice email to us, telling us how much he enjoys the show. And
Oh, fan mail.
yes, a little fan mail. And
thank you, Stephen.
yes, exactly. And let's call it what it is. We have egos too. It's nice to hear that once in a while.
Yes,
So
pat on our backs.
Exactly. So we appreciate Stephen. And he actually gave us a great suggestion. And he said, how about a story on a podcast on Montauk's 7 Sisters?
And, I wonder how many people might think, gee, what a large family of females.
Exactly. And I was thinking the same thing, actually, but in actuality, and thank you, Stephen. And by the way, we've had a couple of other listeners in the past, Bill Good for one, who's actually suggested and given us suggestions for a podcast to our audience. We're always up for that. So if you have anything you'd like us to talk about, and if we can make it happen, we will. But anyway, to Esperanza's point, no, the 7 Sisters are not about 7 young women that grew up in a house in Montauk, but it was actually a small collection of historic homes that date back, Esperanza, to the early 1880s.
Yep.
And when we say historic, how about the architects were McKim, Mead and White, with the landscape architect being Frederick Law Olmstead?
Could we call them starchitects? Well, they were just starting out, I guess, so maybe not yet, but they certainly had a good start with this. And
this talk about credentials, though. They have ultimately become, McKim, Mead and White, they designed the original Penn Station in New York. Frederick Law Olmstead was
later.
Central Park and Prospect Park. The Fens in Boston. Just part of the Emerald Necklace. Just their bodies of work are extraordinary. So again, that's the kind of pedigree and provenance, if you will, that these houses have. So
right, and let's geographically place them, right? This is the Ditch Plains Ditch Plain area of Montauk.
Exactly.
Is it Ditch Plain or Ditch Plains?
That's definitely up for discussion. We could then get into Springs or the Springs, which could create a whole other set of circumstances. Now, I was saying to Esperanza before we went on, I've seen obviously images of these houses and I've known about them, but Esperanza has actually, I'm not going to say she trespassed, but was on some of this property. So Esperanza, tell us a little bit about
I was
this.
a guest, Irwin. Please,
there you go.
Think more highly of me, please. No, yeah. Several years ago, I had the good fortune to be on the property of what is known as Tick Hall, which is a very funny name, but it belonged to Dick Cavett,
right.
The noted television personality.
Right.
And I have visited one other site, which is well, we'll get into it
We
more,
will.
but anyway, they're really, the site could not be more majestic, beautiful, miraculous. I mean, you can think of all the adjectives,
And
and really, when you're there, you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, to be very
that's
honest.
as usual, Esperanza Leon with another amazing segue. And this is what happens. We get a little organic. I was going to save a couple of these quotes for later, but I'm going to, because of Esperanza
Well,
bringing it.
why quote someone else when I'm saying it?
Exactly. I mean, Esperanza's giving you quotes. She was actually physically there. But I like, there was an old article. I mean, this one goes back 12 years. Carissa Katz in the East Hampton Star saying how if the views of the houses is impressive, the view from them is staggering. And she refers to one of the houses from a second story porch, how there is a near 300-degree view of the ocean. And I love this line, Esperanza, a panorama that seems to defy geography until you take a closer look at the map and notice how the land around the association houses bumps out a little into the sea.
Yeah, it really, it's, and I think she was at the Andrews cottage or Andrews house. And truly, I mean, you're there and you feel the remoteness
Yes.
of this area, of Montauk, which, let's not forget, and we'll get into the history a little bit more, but I'm just going to put it right out there front and center. I mean, this was ancestral homeland. These were the ancestral homelands of the Montaukett.
Right.
And we'll obviously, we're going to go to the history of this in the late 1800s, with Arthur Benson and
Right.
his buyout. I mean, it's staggering, which to this day, as we know, and I don't mean to put a really, grave. I know you don't love that, Irwin, but it's important to state that, to this day, the Montaukett tribe is not recognized. I mean, they were basically pushed to, like quote unquote extinction, which they're not.
Right. Right. And
But it kind of all started here. So let's, we're
no,
giving the cult to the white
I,
man,
I,
of these seven sisters, but we have to acknowledge the history that came
and
before.
I'm all in with you bringing that out because it is a very important part of the history of Montauk, of Eastern Long Island, and of course, in a bigger picture of America. But being as our focus is on our Hamptons podcast is Eastern Long Island, I think we should really at least tell everyone about the original seven. In addition to Carissa Katz's article, there was also a terrific article where we're calling some of this information from the Wall Street Journal, Catherine Clark. So thank her as well, along with Ms. Katz. But the original seven, Esperanza, and to your point, first one we'll talk about is the Benson House. And this was Arthur Benson, president of the Brooklyn Gaslight Company, owner of all Montauk, literally at one point,
Mhm.
to the point Esperanza was making, and the developer of the Brooklyn neighborhood that he so modestly called Bensonhurst
Bensonhurst, yeah,
after
yeah.
himself.
I mean, this is like true Gilded Age
Yes,
lore.
that's completely true. I mean, this person created what is an enormous footprint within Brooklyn,
Yep,
Bensonhurst.
including being one of the investors in the Brooklyn Bridge.
Right. That's wow, Esperanza. Man, God.
Gotta love Wikipedia.
Oh man. Very good. So that's but true, definitely a fact. But so Benson House was number one. And we're going to get into in a few minutes what the life was like. Yeah, Esperanza used the term Gilded Age because believe me, that's really what this kind of lifestyle was. But the second house was the DeForest House. Now, these houses are on DeForest Lane, if I'm not mistaken, Esperanza.
They're off of there, yes. Yeah.
Off of there.
Mhm.
So DeForest House, Robert Weeks DeForest and Henry DeForest, prominent attorneys in their day and brothers. Robert was also once president of MoMA, the Museum of Art. Excuse me, yes, Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Not
Not the
Museum of
Museum of
Modern Art.
Modern Art.
The Met.
Ixnay on the MoMA, the museum,
The Met.
The Met. He's always here to clean up for me. Thank you, Esperanza.
My pleasure.
The Orr House, ORR, and no, this is not the hockey player Bobby Orr, circa 1970s on the Boston Bruins. This was a financier, Alexander Orr, president of the Board of Rapid Transit Commissioners, who was influential in setting up the financing and construction of the New York subway system. The Andrews House, the one Esperanza was referring to, has seen William Loring Andrews, the first librarian for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. How about this? A librarian was able to afford a house in Montauk, Esperanza.
Well, clearly, I think he came from a certain position in society.
I would say that actually enabled him to be a librarian, so to speak.
Yes, yes.
Prominent collector of rare books, founding member of the Grolier Club, a private New York club for bibliophiles. I don't know if that still exists. Judging by the name, it probably does, but I wouldn't know. There was the Sanger House, Henry Sanger. They just described him here as a, quote, businessman. Hoyt House, Alfred Hoyt, an investment banker at the time. I didn't realize they were around in the 1880s, but I guess
absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is J.P. Morgan, et cetera,
Through that. And of course, last but not least, Dr. Cornelius Agnew, a noted surgeon of the time. But Esperanza, one thing that really struck me about this was how incredible the houses didn't have at that time, didn't have plumbing, and it wasn't even really essential in the sense that they built the homes around a central clubhouse where they gathered for meals and parties.
Yes.
So again, put yourself back there. And today we're building houses where the kitchen is the be all end all, the great room, that's that focal point of the house. It was irrelevant to these people. They were dining at the club.
Right. And, and I find that actually also quite refreshing in some ways, because it was, people had their families to gather with in their own homes. Right. But then there was always this coming together of a community all together, eating together, as friends. So I find that really rather nice. I mean, I've experienced that to an extent. I mean, there are a lot of these little sort of old resorts that were created back in this time that exist to this day, and I have experienced that a little bit.
And interestingly, I mean, okay, now again, this was obviously at the time. I mean, these were all very wealthy people. This club, this was beyond a private club. This was a club for the Seven Sisters. This wasn't a club for or if you prefer, the other term, which is called the Montauk Association. So this little club was only for them. But to the point you just made, and I think it's really valuable to touch on because I think it's a good one. Again, it was the kind of thing similar to themes we've spoken about really previously in Leisure-Rama, in Sands. This was a community.
Right. I mean, if you mentioned Montauk Association, think about the Georgica Association, which is around the same time, created around the same time, just not with the clubhouse portion of it.
Right.
Rather a bathing pavilion, but still similar in that regard, because it was a place where similar-minded people, similar positions in society came together in a community, lived together in similar homes and so forth. And really it was like a little bit of I hate to use this term, it seems rather derogatory, but it's like a little bit of a ghettoization.
Well, in a sense, I mean,
but think about how remote this was, right? Especially
then. I mean, getting out there, my goodness.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And interestingly, now when these houses were cited, and there was a quote in the East Hampton Star article by Roberta Gosman, who said, very simply, they knew how to place a house, just the way
that, no doubt. Yeah.
The way these were set. And remember, this was McKim, Mead and White building them, Frederick Law Olmstead citing them.
Right.
This was the best of the best.
Yeah.
They'd be the best of the best if they were in business today. So, I mean, this was just to give you an idea of the setting. And from one house, a viewer used to be able to see the other six. Now, obviously, things have grown. It's become more forested and more secluded. But back in the day, you would have to climb to the third floor now, or not even back in the day currently, to get a glimpse of the others.
Hmm. Hmm.
But again, and another theme on our Hamptons, they weren't shying away from each other. This was a community.
Oh yeah, no, that mean these didn't have swimming pools. So
No,
keep in
that's
mind
right.
there were no fences.
That's right.
I mean, really, it's still that way. There are no fences, no, now it's more screening with vegetation, but even
But
to this day, I think there's not the swimming pools are allowed, but they're not allowed like right up next to the
right,
house
they have
where
to be
you'd have to
sited.
fence everything in.
They
Yeah.
have to be sited away from the house. There are no tennis courts on the property, and I really like this part of the article. We're going to talk a little bit about Tick Hall, which I know you've actually seen in person. Um, Tick Hall is Tick Hall. Tick Hall was named that because one of the proprietor. Now, Tick Hall was actually Esperanza. I'm trying to think which that house was actually.
I
Well,
know. I was looking for it
I was
and
trying to
could
find
not.
which one of the seven sisters was actually Tick Hall. Um, Maybe we'll figure it out as we go along.
As we go along, yeah, I know.
But but the story, we'll get into the whole Dick Cavett thing of how he restored the house. But all of these houses in general, at the time, they range from 4,000 to 7,000 square feet. Certainly not small,
No, right. No.
but small by today's standards. And Martha Rogers Cavett was quoted in this article, and I think this is a great quote. How this is not like the big houses in the Hamptons with 10 bedrooms. The kind of people who love the Seven Sisters wouldn't be happy in one of those. So this really, the market for a house like this, and even in this article in the Wall Street Journal, like Tim Davis, a broker, is quoted here and saying there's a certain sector of the market that wants to live in a time stood still kind of environment. And this is really telling, Esperanza, but those buyers are far and few between. Now,
Ah, that's a
yeah,
big sigh for me.
yeah. I mean, like, this is like, for me, okay, you're giving up. Here's one of Esperanza Leon's favorite word. You're giving up certain amenities, yes, but isn't there some value, Esperanza, in living in history like this?
Oh, those
I mean,
walls, it's like they speak, I think.
I
Yeah.
mean, and just not just even the history. Now, let's even put the historical perspective aside, but cited by Frederick Law, I guess it is part of the history, but it takes in more, I think, of the physical. Cited the way they were by a Frederick Law Olmstead, seemingly leaning over the ocean, really, not viewing it. It's just, you've been there. You've actually seen what it feels. And have you ever seen, I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to surprise Esperanza with this question, but I'm going to ask her. I mean, was it that kind of property, like you said to yourself, my goodness, I've never seen something that looked quite like this in terms of how it was sited in the wildernessy kind of area it was in and everything else?
I think that's just I've been on a few properties on that in that area of Montauk, and it's just that's Montauk. It's pure Montauk,
Right.
right? And what is most wonderful about these homes, which we're so grateful that they are designated. They're not only listed on the state and national registers, but they are designated locally, town of East Hampton, as a historic district, as you
Right.
mentioned, the Montauk Association. So they haven't really changed. It just uh, that if you took this same this same area, these parcels, and then developed them as they would be developed today, you would completely lose that character of Montauk,
Right.
which still shines through and still comes through. That wilderness that you say, and that remoteness is so palpable there.
Yeah.
The ocean breezes, you feel like you're on an island. That's just
Yeah, well,
it.
and that's what one of the owners, Roberta Gosman Donovan, quoted in this 2012 article, was saying, like, the water, sometimes it glistens like diamonds, like you
Mhm.
just can't believe it. Paul Golberger, someone that we've spoken about many times on the show, in a New York Times article 30 years ago, 94, called the Seven Sisters one of the most remarkable architectural assemblages on the East End. They are almost modest, but they are this is really another beautiful statement, Esperanza, but they are one of the few examples of planning as opposed to pure
Yeah.
architecture in any American summer resort. I mean,
Well,
that's
that's the most important quality of it, really, is the planning side of it by Olmsted.
yeah. And it's funny, now we researched all of this, but until I just read that statement to you out loud, it never really hit me that way because yes, we've all seen beautiful. We've spoken about Norman Jaffe, for example, on multiple episodes of podcasts of our Hamptons, but this was an assemblage. This was 7 houses built together at the same time to dialogue with each other rather than just a solitary, beautiful as it may be, um, Jaffe home or Gordon Bunshaft home or whatever. These were dialoguing with each other and planned to do
And
so.
and with their surroundings, truly,
Yes,
I mean, if you transport yourself, like I said, to today, and the way, this is a subdivision, if you will, and
right.
and the way this would be built upon as a subdivision of 7 residences, it would it would just be it would just obliterate. I mean, I can't repeat this enough. It would obliterate the quality of the area, of the
Yeah,
natural landscape, because you would have, and we'll always, our favorite term from Paul Golberger, you'd have these large, huge homes with tennis courts and pools shoehorned
right.
into these. They're substantial parcels, but
Yes,
the way that this is now, to still today, as he says, they're modest. I mean, 4,000, 6,000 square feet is not so small, but
correct.
they look modest on landscape. I'm not going to use the word nestled because that's
Right.
just like the worst real estate term you could possibly, but they just kind of, they fit into the environment in a way that nothing that is built today does.
It should also be noted, yeah, very well put. And again, I've unfortunately, amazingly, I've never seen it in the flesh myself, but I'm really going to have to really, I'm going to really have to change that and really see it for myself. But um, these houses also being of the age they are, and it shouldn't be minimized. These are high maintenance properties, to maintain them in these ways. We have a quote here from this Wall Street Journal article. There's a Todd Smith whose family has struggled financially to afford the maintenance, and he remembered bundling up around a fire in the winter when the house had no insulation. 1880s, they weren't really insulation probably wasn't a thing.
Well, it
Eh,
wasn't a thing because remember, they were summer cottages.
Correct.
This was a summer colony. This
All
was
right.
not a year-round house. So they
Exactly.
would drain the pipes and hightail it out of here until the following summer.
And the insulation was stuff we've spoken about in the past. Might have been old newspapers or other
Seaweed.
artifacts, right? Whatever. But I like what he said. You're only rich if you sell it, and we really don't want to sell it. And he's done a lot of the repairs and everything himself. But again, these are high maintenance houses. Now we should really the Cavett property is technically, and Esperanza has seen this, so she could really speak to it firsthand. And I remember when this happened in '97. I mean, it was a massive fire,
Yeah.
completely destroyed this property. But the Cavetts, that restoration, it's in this article,
Well, it really was a reconstruction.
but
Yeah.
not, but a reconstruction with, I like the term that they used, forensic architecture,
Hmm.
down to the sagging porch, the squeaky window. And there was a documentary about it, which I should really watch. From the Ashes, The Life and Times of Tick Hall. I mean, these people.
Yeah, they were very faithful to every last detail, it would seem, and truly, because you set foot in this home and you would never, unless you had full knowledge of dating, mark woodworking, and I don't know what else, you really would be hard pressed to think that it wasn't built
Right.
as the original, in the late 19th century, that it was rebuilt in the late 90s. Yeah.
And you read some of the details of what they did. They examined the foundation, sketch drawings by a draper that made the curtains. I mean, they tracked down the model of an antique music box to put back in the house. Like they really talk about being true and devoted and recognizing the importance. I mean, my goodness. And now this house was actually on, to your point, we were talking about it. I was always curious about this. It was on 7 feet, about 20 acres, that house. So some of these, and it talks about here how Ms. Cavett was struck by the remoteness of the property when she first visited it. Just to your point that you were bringing out.
Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, if you ever go down out to Montauk Point and the lighthouse, you
Right.
get a sense of really being out in the middle of the ocean almost. And being at these properties has a very similar sensation.
Yeah. By the way, I found that the Tick Hall moniker for this house was coined in jest by one-time owner of the house, Wall Street lawyer Harrison Tweed, for the prevalence of bugs in the neighborhood, which I guess
Those little eight-legged buggers.
exactly. Now, you know, some of the current owners, I'm just bringing this out. Now, this again, we're going back 5 years in this article, but I'm just wondering. The origin of this house again was really Arthur Benson buying all this property to make a private club for a half a dozen friends of his.
Right,
That's
right,
that's
right. I
really
mean,
at the end of the
that's
day
much
what it
like
was.
what happened later with Carl Fisher. Benson, this was his, well, almost like his own private playground for the
Literally, I
rich.
mean, it's pretty private. Again, it's pretty private now. Could you imagine it in the 1880s?
Right,
So,
right. Yeah, I mean,
but
originally I think it was like a hunting grounds too for,
yes,
right? Yeah.
that's right. That's
Hmm.
right. It was for hunting, fishing with him and these 6 other, to use the Thomas Wolfe term from 30 years ago, masters of the universe. That's who
Yes.
it was for.
Yes.
When currently it's Julian Schnabel lives there, Bruce Weber, uh, Sandra Brandt. I mean, I don't know if these people are really, I guess they're not playing polo together necessarily, um, but I guess their artistic nature, in a sense, one was a fashion photographer, an artist. It
Yeah,
spoke
they're
to them.
sympathetic. Yeah, they're sympathetic to the history, and I would imagine. I mean, not just the the location,
Right.
um, but definitely I know that the clubhouse also was destroyed.
Right. I was going to ask about the clubhouse because
Right.
that's
So that actually, I don't know if it's in the works now, but to my knowledge, it was going to be reconstructed as a private home
right.
now, currently.
Right. But we don't really know what the do we know what the status is? Is it currently, has it ever been rebuilt, or is it
No, that's
just
what I'm saying.
it
It is going to be
it is
reconstructed. Yes.
okay. Okay, so
Yes.
okay, very good. Okay. So there you have it. I think this is as good a place as any to start wrapping up the Seven Sisters. And we always say this, Esperanza, on our Hamptons podcast about transporting yourself back in time. You know, and I'm throwing all my notes on the ground, and now I'm just gonna. This is where the audience might get afraid when Irwin starts free-forming. But you know, um, when you think about it, a guy who developed Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, buys all of this acreage for half a dozen friends to make this enclave, brings in McKim, Mead and White, brings in Franklin, Frederick Law Olmstead, and creates. We gave the quotes, the Golberger quote, everything else. I mean, this is as unique. This is arguably as unique an environment, micro environment, compound, if you will, of really anything, anything you'll see out there in present day. I mean, It's extraordinary
Yeah,
assemblage.
it is. It is. And I just really want to bring it back. We have to
Bring it back to the beginning. You
bring
should.
it back to the beginning of remembering, and let's think about these amazing, I mean, it's ancestral homelands of the Montauk, who are still to this day litigating, fighting with the government to be acknowledged, to have land that was taken away from them, essentially given back or
Right.
something. And yeah, I mean, anyone interested in that history should really look into it. There were various lawsuits. There are still pharaohs around
That's right.
everybody, and they have been fighting the good fight for quite some time.
Yeah.
So yes, we respect and admire the starchitecture of the Seven Sisters, and this beautiful, beautiful place where those structures are. But I have to acknowledge the really tragic history of the Montauk also.
Yep. You can't rewrite history, and that's a legitimate part. And it's a theme we have touched on our Hamptons podcast previously. I mean, they were the first.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they were the first, and but it really is. It's Montauk is special, and this particular section of Montauk still is steeped in history. And if you can get near it, maybe swim parallel on the ocean, Esperanza. Maybe you can see it from
Well, I don't
there.
know.
I don't know how far. Go. If you get to Ditch Plains, just
Take your
make a
life
left
into
and go
your own
east.
hands.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would venture bike riding down that dirt road. Probably cameras all along the way, but these are really something to see. That was a
Yeah.
good trip,
Yeah.
Esperanza.
Thank
Thanks for
you,
taking that
Irwin.
with me.
Yeah. And thank you to our fan who brought this, to not to our attention, but definitely made us pursue the topic, which is definitely a worthy one.
And really, I do want to stress that it's a good place to close, Esperanza. We thank our fans because people have said these things to us, and in all candor, we've also had suggestions sometimes that we actually looked into, but there was just not enough there to create a podcast out of it. But if anybody has something interesting that they think our audience would like, and we would like to delve into, please email us at go to our website and email us, talk to us on Instagram. Or when you see us walking down one of the streets, just yell to us and we'll listen there too as well.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, I'm thinking as I keep segueing to this Arthur Benson and the Montauk, but I'm going to have a suggestion for you, Irwin.
Okay.
Maybe a good one to follow up would be Freetown.
Yeah. Esperanza has been wanting that Freetown episode for a long time, and we really should make it happen. We really should make it happen. See, Esperanza is now talking as a fan. She wants to hear Freetown.
I am a fan. I'm a listener. I'm a fan. No starchitecture there, but definitely
no
history. Lots of
but
history.
But certainly a worthy topic. Well, we actually even had to touch on it on the recent episode about discos, because 44 3 Mile Harbor Road was actually in Freetown.
Yes,
Is actually in
exactly.
Freetown.
Is. Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. On that note, Esperanza, as always, a pleasure.
Thank you, Irwin. Until next time.
Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts. It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leone, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons.